Picture this. You're standing in the middle of nowhere. Not a road in sight. Just rocks, sand, and the kind of terrain that would make most vehicles beg for mercy. Now, imagine the machine beside you doesn't just survive this punishment, it thrives on it. These are the trucks nobody talks about anymore, the forgotten warriors of the off-road world. While everyone obsesses over the latest Raptors and TRX models, these legends sit in the shadows, waiting for someone to remember what they accomplished. Today, I'm taking you through 10 off-road trucks that rewrote the rulebook. Trucks that climbed mountains nobody thought possible. Trucks that crossed deserts where others died. And trucks that did it all while the world looked the other way. Stay with me until the end, because the final truck on this list will blow your mind with what it was capable of. Let's start where it all began, 1946. World War II just ended. Soldiers returned home with stories about a truck that went anywhere, survived everything. Dodge looked at their military weapon carriers and thought, what if civilians could buy this beast? They created the Power Wagon, and nothing was ever the same. This wasn't some marketing gimmick. The Power Wagon was America's first mass-produced four-wheel drive pickup truck. Before this, if you wanted to go off-road, you walked. The Power Wagon featured a flathead six-cylinder engine with 94 horsepower. By today's standards, that sounds pathetic, but here's what nobody tells you. That engine moved a 1-ton truck through mud that swallowed other vehicles whole. It crawled over rocks that would crack modern chassis like eggshells. The genius was in the details. A 2-speed transfer case gave drivers the ability to switch between high and low-range gearing. When you hit the impossible trail, you just pulled a lever and suddenly had the torque to move mountains. Solid front and rear axles with leaf spring suspension meant this truck could articulate over obstacles that would leave contemporary trucks high and dry. High ground clearance and short overhangs allowed it to navigate terrain at angles that seemed physically impossible. But the most revolutionary feature? The front-mounted winch. Imagine being the first farmer to get stuck in 1946 and realize your truck could pull itself out. No phone calls, no tow truck, just you, your Power Wagon, and a cable. The truck literally told the world, I need no roads, and it proved it every single day until 1968, when the original run ended. Today, pristine examples sell for over $100,000. Why? Because people finally understand what Dodge built, a legend that paved the way for every four-wheel drive truck you see today. Now, let's jump to something completely insane. Close your eyes for a second. What brand comes to mind when I say supercar? Ferrari? Porsche? Probably Lamborghini, right? Now, imagine Lamborghini, the company famous for scissor doors and V12 screams, building a military-style off-road truck. You'd call me crazy, but in 1986, they did exactly that. The Lamborghini LM002 earned a nickname that tells you everything you need to know. Rambo Lambo. This beast started as a failed military prototype called the Cheetah. The early version had the engine in the rear, which made it handle like a drunk elephant on ice. Engineers scrapped that disaster and moved the powertrain up front. But they didn't use some ordinary truck engine. Oh no. They grabbed the 5.2-liter V12 from the Lamborghini Countach Quattrovalvole. Let me repeat that. They took a supercar engine, the same engine that powered one of the most iconic sports cars ever made, and stuffed it into an off-road truck. The result? 450 horsepower in a vehicle designed to conquer deserts. While a 1986 Chevy Suburban wheezed out 240 horses, the LM002 demolished 0 to 60 in 7.7 seconds. This 3-ton behemoth hit 117 miles per hour on test runs. For context, that was faster than almost every SUV on the planet at the time. The performance was bonkers, but the real magic was watching this luxury monster actually off-road. Pirelli designed special Scorpion tires exclusively for the LM002, one version for mixed terrain, another specifically for sand. These weren't just tires, they were run-flat designs that could handle desert heat, massive weight, and speeds that would shred normal rubber. The truck featured all-wheel drive, a high-strength belly pan, and a weight distribution so perfect it matched Lamborghini's own supercars. Middle Eastern royalty couldn't buy them fast enough. They'd blast across dunes at speeds that would terrify normal drivers, then pull up to five-star hotels with full leather interiors and air conditioning waiting inside. Only 301 were ever built. Just 48 made it to American shores. Today, these trucks sell for $400,000 or more. The LM002 proved something nobody believed possible. A truck could have the soul of a supercar and the capability of a military transport, all at once. Let's talk about something that flew under the radar for way too long. You know what gets forgotten in the off-road conversation? The trucks that just work. No drama, no headlines, just pure, stubborn reliability. The Nissan Frontier Pro 4X is that truck. While Ford marketed the Raptor with million-dollar campaigns and Chevy threw money at the Colorado ZR2, Nissan quietly built something remarkable. The Frontier kept things simple in the best way possible. A naturally aspirated V6 engine when everyone else chased turbos and hybrids. No trendy powertrains, no complicated electronics, just a proven motor mated to a proper four-wheel drive system. The Pro 4X trim added Bilstein off-road shocks, electronic locking rear differential, and skid plates that actually protected vital components. Unlike some trucks that treat skid plates as decorative accessories, Nissan made theirs functional. Here's what earned respect from off-road enthusiasts. The Frontier's compact size meant it could squeeze through trails where full-size trucks got stuck. Tight switchbacks, narrow canyon paths, dense forest trails, the Frontier navigated them all with a maneuverability that made bigger trucks look clumsy. But that compact size didn't sacrifice capability. This truck crawled over rocks, powered through mud, and climbed steep grades that would make Jeep owners nervous.
The secret weapon was durability. This platform proved itself over decades with minimal changes because it didn't need major updates. The formula worked. Farmers bought them and drove 200,000 miles without major issues. Adventure seekers loaded them with camping gear and disappeared into the wilderness for weeks. The Frontier just kept going. No complaints, no breakdowns. Just a truck that understood its job and did it perfectly. Critics said it looked dated. They complained about the interior materials. They whined about fuel economy. Meanwhile, Frontier owners smiled and drove past broken-down competitors on the trail. Because when you're 50 miles from civilization with no cell service, you don't care about infotainment screens. You care about getting home. The Frontier gets you home every single time. That's why it belongs on this list. Now we need to discuss a truck that changed the game in the most American way possible. The Chevrolet Colorado ZR2. This truck took everything learned from decades of off-road engineering and packaged it into a mid-size platform that punched way above its weight class. First introduced for the 2017 model year, the ZR2 immediately caught attention. But not just from weekend warriors. The United States military looked at this truck and said, "We need this." Let me explain why that matters. The military doesn't care about marketing. They don't care about horsepower bragging rights. They care about one thing. Can this vehicle complete the mission in the worst conditions imaginable and bring soldiers home alive? The Colorado ZR2 checked every box, so much so that 90% of its off-the-shelf parts ended up in the infantry squad vehicle. When the military trusts your platform that much, you've built something special. The genius was in the details. Chevrolet widened the track by 3.5 inches compared to the regular Colorado. That extra width provided stability on off-camber trails and prevented rollovers during aggressive maneuvers. They raised the ride height by 2 inches, improving ground clearance and approach angles. Front and rear electronic locking differentials meant power went exactly where you needed it. One wheel slipping on ice? No problem.
Lock the differential and all wheels pull equally. But the secret weapon was Multimatic DSSV dampers. These weren't ordinary shocks. Multimatic developed spool valve technology originally for racing. Position-sensitive damping meant the suspension adapted instantly to terrain changes. Smooth highway cruising, the dampers stayed soft. Hit washboard dirt roads at speed, they firmed up automatically to prevent harsh bottoming. This technology gave the ZR2 capabilities that cost twice as much in competing trucks. The combination created something special. A truck that could crawl over boulders at walking speed, then blast across the desert at 70 miles per hour without breaking a sweat. GM later expanded the ZR2 treatment to the full-size Silverado and added the GMC Canyon AT4X variant. But the original Colorado ZR2 proved the concept. Mid-size trucks could match full-size capability. The combination created something special. A truck that could crawl over boulders at walking speed, then blast across the desert at 70 miles per hour without breaking a sweat. GM later expanded the ZR2 treatment to the full-size Silverado and added the GMC Canyon AT4X variant. But the original Colorado ZR2 proved the concept. Mid-size trucks could match full-size capability if engineered correctly. Today, these trucks dominate off-road competitions and military deployments around the world, all because Chevrolet understood that capability comes from smart engineering, not just bigger engines. Let's pivot to something controversial, the Hummer H3T. People love to hate Hummers. Too big, too thirsty, too much. But here's what nobody wants to admit. The H3T was legitimately capable. While everyone mocked the brand, this limited production truck went places that made trail-rated vehicles sweat. The H3T took the already capable H3 SUV and added a 5-foot truck bed with built-in storage containers. This created the versatility people actually needed. Camping gear in the bed, recovery equipment secured in the storage, room for firewood, coolers, tools. But unlike most truck beds that compromise off-road geometry, the H3T maintained the departure angles that made the H3 famous. Under that controversial body sat legitimate hardware. Standard equipment included front and rear locking differentials, not optional, standard. That meant maximum traction always available at the push of a button. The suspension featured long travel and impressive articulation. When one wheel lifted off the ground, the other 3 kept pulling. Ground clearance exceeded what most owners would ever need, but it was there when trails got nasty. The Alpha variant added more power and capability. Towing capacity increased, off-road performance improved. Yet the H3T remained controversial because of the Hummer image. Soccer moms bought H2s to go grocery shopping, and the entire brand suffered guilt by association. But talk to people who actually took H3Ts off-road, and you hear a different story. They speak reverently about water crossings that submerged lesser trucks, about rock gardens that looked impassable until the H3T proved otherwise, about desert races where Hummers kept running while competitors broke down. Only a limited number were built before GM killed the Hummer brand. Today, clean examples are getting harder to find. The joke's on the haters. While they laughed at Hummer owners, those owners were discovering places few people will ever see. The H3T wasn't perfect, but it was far more capable than anyone gave it credit for. That's precisely why it belongs on this list. Here's where things get interesting. Everyone knows about the Toyota Tacoma. It's reliable, it holds value, off-road enthusiasts love them. But there's a truck that came before the Tacoma that almost nobody in America remembers, the Hilux. This truck achieved legendary status everywhere except the United States, and that's a tragedy because the Hilux might be the toughest truck ever built.
Outside America, the Hilux became synonymous with indestructible. Top Gear tried to kill one. They crashed it into a tree, dropped it from a crane, set it on fire, drowned it in the ocean, then stuck it on top of a building they demolished. Every time, after minimal repairs, it started up and drove. That episode wasn't exaggeration. That was typical Hilux behavior. These trucks operated in war zones where maintenance meant hope and prayer. They crossed deserts that killed other vehicles. They served as the backbone of agriculture in developing nations where breakdowns meant starvation. The secret was simplicity taken to its logical extreme. Basic engines that ran on questionable fuel, suspensions with so few parts that field repairs needed just hand tools, electrical systems simple enough that anyone could diagnose problems with a multimeter. Toyota engineered out everything that could fail and focused obsessively on what remained. The result was a truck that prioritized function over everything else. In America, the Tacoma replaced the Hilux and softened the formula slightly for comfort. But in most of the world, the Hilux continued evolving as a pure work truck. Farmers in Australia drove them 300,000 miles as a warm-up. Aid organizations in Africa relied on them to reach remote villages. Militaries around the globe used them because when the supply chain broke down, Hiluxes kept running. You can't buy a new Hilux in the United States, which is criminal. But the legend persists in other markets where people need trucks that work rather than trucks that impress. The Hilux proved that capability isn't about horsepower or fancy technology. It's about building something so fundamentally sound that failure becomes nearly impossible. That philosophy influenced every reliable truck that followed. Now, let's talk about the Ford F-150 Raptor. Wait, you're thinking, everyone knows about the Raptor. What's it doing on a list of trucks nobody talks about? Here's the thing. People talk about the current Raptor, but they've forgotten what the original Raptor accomplished when it debuted for the 2010 model year. This truck didn't just enter the off-road market, it created an entirely new category that didn't exist before. Before 2010, fast off-roading meant building a custom pre-runner. You bought a base truck, gutted it, installed racing suspension, added bigger tires, tuned the engine, and spent six figures creating something the manufacturer never intended. The Raptor changed everything. Ford looked at Baja Racing and said, "What if we built that truck from the factory?"
The original Raptor featured long travel suspension with Fox internal bypass dampers. These weren't budget shocks. They were the same technology professional racers paid thousands for. The suspension provided massive wheel travel, allowing the truck to absorb huge hits at high speeds without braking. A powerful 6.2-liter V8 engine delivered 411 horsepower, giving the Raptor acceleration that shocked sports car owners. But the real innovation was the complete package. Ford didn't just bolt on aftermarket parts. They engineered the entire truck for high-speed desert running. Wider track, reinforced frame, upgraded brakes, skid plates that actually protected components, special terrain modes that optimized throttle response and transmission behavior for different surfaces. The Raptor handled like a Baja truck, but drove to work on Monday morning without complaint. Critics called it excessive. Journalists questioned who needed a truck this capable. Then people bought them and discovered something magical. The Raptor made off-roading accessible. You didn't need fabrication skills or mechanical knowledge. You just needed to point the truck at the horizon and go. Suddenly, weekend warriors were jumping whoops and blasting across dunes with confidence. The Raptor democratized performance off-roading. Now we're in the third generation, and the Raptor has grown more capable with each iteration. But that original 2010 model deserves recognition for changing the entire industry. Every high-performance off-road truck since then, from the Ram TRX to the Toyota Tundra TRD Pro, exists because the Raptor proved the market wanted factory-built performance off-roaders. Ford took a risk. They invested millions developing a truck that might fail completely. Instead, they created a phenomenon. Let's shift gears to something most people have never heard of, the first-generation Jeep Gladiator, produced from 1962 to 1988. Not the modern Gladiator that everyone knows, the original J-Series truck the Jeep built before pickup trucks became fashion statements. This truck was pure function wrapped in steel, and it's criminal how forgotten it became. The J-Series Gladiator came from an era when trucks were tools, not lifestyle accessories. Jeep designed them for farmers who needed to haul feed, construction workers who transported materials, and families who used trucks for actual work. The genius was adapting Jeep's legendary four-wheel drive system into a pickup platform. Everything that made Wagoneer and Cherokee capable off-road translated to the Gladiator with the added benefit of an open bed. Multiple wheelbase options meant buyers could spec the perfect truck for their needs. Short wheelbase for maneuverability, long wheelbase for hauling capacity. Engine options ranged from inline sixes to V8s, providing flexibility for different budgets and requirements. But regardless of configuration, every Gladiator shared one trait. They went places other trucks couldn't reach. The solid axles front and rear provided the articulation necessary for serious off-roading. When trails got technical, the Gladiator could flex and maintain traction where independent suspension trucks gave up. High ground clearance and short overhangs meant aggressive approach and departure angles. These trucks climbed steep trails, crossed rivers, and navigated boulder fields without drama. What made the J-Series special was its longevity in production. From 1962 to 1988, Jeep kept building these trucks because people kept buying them. Not for image, not for status, because they needed a truck that worked. Ranchers in Wyoming drove them until the odometers rolled over multiple times. Forest services relied on them for backcountry access. Off-road enthusiasts built them into the first real rock crawlers before rock crawling had a name. Today, finding a clean J-Series Gladiator is nearly impossible. Most were worked to death and left to rust in fields when they finally gave up. But the survivors command serious money from collectors who understand their significance. These trucks influenced every Jeep pickup that followed, including the modern Gladiator that carries their name. The J-Series proved that Jeep understood trucks long before the current truck boom began. We need to talk about the GMC Canyon AT4X. GMC took everything Chevy learned developing the Colorado ZR2 and asked a simple question: what if we made it even better? The result was a truck that combined all the ZR2's capability with refinements that pushed performance to another level. The AT4X variant, particularly when equipped with the American Expedition Vehicles package, created something special. The base AT4X already impressed with Multimatic DSSV dampers, electronic locking differentials, and a factory lift. But the AEV package took things further. Bead-lock-capable wheels meant you could run extremely low tire pressures for maximum traction on sand and rock without risking the tire coming off the rim. Additional skid plates protected every vulnerable component. Upgraded rock rails took impacts that would bend lesser trucks.
Engine options included reliable 4-cylinders and 6-cylinders that ran forever with minimal maintenance. These weren't powerful engines, they weren't fast, but they pulled steady and kept pulling for 200,000 miles without major repairs. Match that reliability with affordable parts availability, and you had the perfect platform for off-road modification. Enthusiasts discovered something special about the Ranger platform. The suspension could be modified easily for better off-roading. Lift kits were cheap and effective, bigger tires fit without major surgery. The truck responded well to simple modifications without requiring extensive fabrication. This accessibility created an entire generation of off-road enthusiasts who learned on Rangers before moving to more expensive platforms. Over 7 million second-gen Rangers were built before production ended. That's a staggering number, reflecting how much people loved these trucks. They worked as farm trucks, delivery vehicles, and weekend warriors. Mazda rebadged them as B-Series trucks and sold them successfully for years.
the Ranger proved that compact trucks could be serious off-roaders if engineered correctly. Today, finding a clean second-gen Ranger is increasingly difficult. Most were worked hard and scrapped when rust finally won. But the survivors trade hands among enthusiasts who remember what these trucks represented. Affordable capability, simple reliability, the perfect platform for learning off-road skills. The second-gen Ranger taught more people about four-wheel driving than any other truck in its era. That legacy deserves recognition. Finally, let's discuss something that broke every rule, the Land Rover Defender. Now, I know what you're thinking. The Defender is famous. Everyone knows about Defenders. But here's the truth. Most people know the new Defender, with its fancy technology and luxury features. They've forgotten what the original Defender represented. Pure, uncompromising off-road capability that prioritized function over absolutely everything else. The Defender lineage traces back to 1947, when Land Rover designed the Series 1 for post-war Britain. They needed a vehicle that could handle agricultural work, reach remote areas, and basically replace the horse. The design philosophy was radical. Make it simple, make it tough, make it repairable with basic tools. That philosophy guided Land Rover for decades as the Series 1 evolved into Series 2, Series 3, and finally the Defender in 1983.
What made Defenders special was their approach to off-road capability. While other manufacturers added features and complexity, Land Rover stripped away everything non-essential. The body was aluminum over a steel frame because aluminum doesn't rust. The suspension used simple coil springs and solid axles because that setup provides maximum articulation. The drivetrain featured permanent four-wheel drive because switching to four-wheel drive meant you'd already gotten stuck. The genius was in the details nobody sees. Ground clearance that made obstacles disappear, approach and departure angles that let you drive straight up mountains, short wheelbase options that turned in impossibly tight spaces. But more importantly, every component was designed for field repair. Farmers in remote areas could fix Defenders with hand tools and improvised parts. That repairability made the Defender beloved in developing countries where breakdowns meant disaster. Defenders served everywhere humans went, and some places humans probably shouldn't have gone. Arctic expeditions relied on them to reach research stations. African safaris used them to traverse the savannah. Military forces around the globe chose them for reliability in combat conditions. The Defender became the vehicle of choice when failure wasn't an option. Not because it never broke, but because when it did break, you could fix it. The old Defender remained in production until 2016 with relatively minor updates. 70 years of continuous production based on the same fundamental design. Think about that. While the automotive world chased technology and features, Land Rover kept building the same basic truck because nothing worked better. When production finally ended, people mourned not just a vehicle, but an entire philosophy of what trucks should be. The modern Defender brings luxury and technology, which makes it capable in new ways, but something was lost in the translation, that raw simplicity, that confidence that comes from knowing your truck can survive anything and be fixed with a hammer and determination. The original Defender represented peak off-road engineering before anyone cared about infotainment screens or heated seats. It existed to get you there and get you home. Nothing more, nothing less. So there you have it, 10 trucks that changed off-road capability forever. Trucks that proved performance comes from engineering, not marketing. From the Power Wagon that started it all to the Defender that perfected simplicity. From the Rambo Lambo that nobody saw coming to the Frontier that just works. These trucks share one trait. They did the impossible and nobody remembers. But here's what matters. These trucks proved that true capability isn't loud. It doesn't need social media validation or magazine covers. True capability shows up in the middle of nowhere when everything goes wrong. It shows up in the truck that gets you home when others would leave you stranded. These trucks earned their legends one trail at a time, one impossible climb at a time, one unbreakable promise at a time. The next time someone asks about off-road trucks, remember these stories. Remember that before the Instagram overlanding trend, before the YouTube build channels, trucks were being built that could genuinely go anywhere. Remember that the best trucks aren't always the ones everyone talks about. Sometimes the best trucks are the ones that simply work, day after day, mile after mile, long after the hype dies down. That's the real story of off-road capability. Not the specs you read online, not the promotional videos. The story written in dust and mud, and the satisfied nods of people who pushed their trucks to the limit and watched them deliver. These 10 trucks understood that story. They lived that story, and that's exactly why they deserve to be remembered.